going back, not gonna buy into all that. Hey, hey, ain't gonna hide, gonna let all the fears slide. Got mother nature is on my side, got all of the loving growing inside.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the New Now. I'm delighted to have a first-time guest on, Nathaniel Gillis, demon hunter, expert in, well, I'm going to allow him to share as this is our first time. So, Nathaniel, welcome to the show. Please maybe inform
Thank you.
myself, and some of our readers specifically what you do and maybe why you do it, and we'll,
Right.
we'll take it from there.
Well, I am Nathaniel Gillis, and I am known as a demonologist. That was the path I took to get to the mountain I'm climbing. And so my discipline and focus as of late has been some of the more sinister aspects of this intelligence, and it has led me into some unique crevices. So I'm glad to be with you. As I told you before, it's always great to be on a new show and to meet new hosts. So thank you so much for having me on.
Well, let's say, how would you define a demon then? Let's start there.
Ooh. Well, in antiquity, there were two dominating theories. The first one was that a demon itself was a form of mutated consciousness that would kind of turn into what's called a divinized ancestor, a liminal entity between two worlds, one in which you would pray to, and then it would give our ancestors divine healing, insights, and even technology, which is strange. We'll get to that
Mm.
here in the future. And the other side of the coin was that these were deities in a way, and that they were also liminal, being present with us but absent from us at the same time. And so our ancestors would quite literally build altars within the proximity of their presence, hoping that with sacrifices and emotional posturing and dietary modifications that somehow they would pay attention to us. And then I guess those are the dawning first breaths of demonology within the Levant. And then it kind of evolved into them possessing people. And now you have the possession phenomenon, the relocation of consciousness. And so those were the two dominating theories. And then you get into the 16th century, and then it evolved once more to now these beings actually having their own pathologies, their own victimologies, which is quite fascinating on my part.
Well, what do you mean by their own pathologies?
Oh, well, they favored certain victims over others. They had their own ways of self-replicating their species. And if you will, the program changed. And early in those demonologists, specifically Montague Summers and Father Sinistro of Amino, started to realize that there was a correlation between what the phenomenon was harvesting in terms of excretions and secretions, that there was a correlation between those sourcing of secretions and what was actually being used in ritual magic.
Ah.
And so it quite literally, it got darker than we originally thought in antiquity, far darker.
Can you go into that a little deeper?
Yes, yes. So in antiquity, there was a presence in the darkness that was wanting to become incarnate. And it was starting to create practitioners. But before they became practitioners, they were at first experiencers.
Mm.
And so out of nowhere, we have cases in Witcher, not just Witcher literature, but prior to that, obviously, but in ritual bowls, where just the primordial man is stoking his campfire. He gets a thought in his brain. Hey, listen, go and take a small piece of metal, carve the name of an unclean spirit into that metal, and then go and plant that into someone's body.
Mm.
Where have we heard that from, my friend? And so that's when you have this phenomenon trying to not just become incarnate, but the idea was is a strange form of technology where the consciousness would merge with the metal. And then the metal, once it's imparted, implanted rather into the body, would merge with that body. Now that entity has a new body. And that was another way that the phenomenon would possess people. But it's a fascinating,
Very interesting.
yeah, it's, but again, what I'm realizing after researching this for as long as I have, that I've been studying demonology, but in reality, I've been studying another intelligence at the same time, and that's where I've been at this point in my research.
What do you mean another intelligence? I mean, I think I know what you're talking about, but I'm curious how you would
Well,
describe
there
it.
is an intelligence out there that has been masquerading as alien, ET,
Mm,
and even
yeah.
to a large degree,
Wow.
demonic. When we look at carvings on walls and hauntings,
Mm,
666, and you see that a lot of the demonology being presented by this intelligence is not rooted in biblical literacy. It's mirroring quite literally what the housewife or just what the regular person, the zeitgeist of the populace would believe a demon is, which is troubling to me. So there is a reflective nature to what is occurring. And it's much like what we see in ufology. At the advent of Kenneth Arnold witnessing flying saucers, all of a sudden it became a part of the consciousness of the population, and now they're all seeing flying saucers. So there is a reflective nature to this. And to a large degree, it's led me to believe that there is manipulation taking place because if we can look everywhere but where we should be looking, we'll never get to the truth of the matter. That's just my personal position.
I would agree with you. Well, have you noticed, let's say, getting back to metal and body, an increase,
Mhm.
let's say, in so-called demon possession over the last several years?
Yes, I have. And the Vatican's struggling with that because we no longer have Father Gabriel Amorths. We don't have Malachi Martins to fill the void. In addition to that, it's quite possible, this is something I've been toying with as of late, it's quite possible that we've misunderstood the rule of possession completely.
Hmm.
See, again, in the 16th century, there was a splinter within theology. We had the Kabbalistic movement in Safti Israel coming out and saying, listen, some of these beings, and this is quite controversial, I know, but some of these beings are solving their own murders. Very strange stuff. They were having case studies in Safti Israel where possession actually led to pregnancy,
Hmm.
which we didn't see that specifically within the. It was usually just, horns and hooves and that kind of methodology. But I think that the phenomenon made eye contact with us. And that's when I kind of realized that pregnancy or possession to us is pregnancy to them, in that it's possible that the relocation of consciousness is a way that they're trying to replicate life.
Interesting.
And yeah, it's a whole. I don't want to ramble, my friend, but it's fascinating stuff. But it's only until you get through the sedimentary nature of what we've heard here in the West that we start asking questions, right? Why are they carving symbols under people's eyelids? What is
Why
going on here?
why are there carving symbols under people's eyelids?
Right,
What do you think?
right. There is a
I mean, you mean the whole black eye phenomenon with all the stars I've seen supposedly? I've seen that. I don't know if that's
I
related to
mean,
this or not.
literally
Yeah,
underneath the eyelids.
right.
Let me say it like this. I had a case study of a remote viewer. I was working with his son, and this will kind of put everything into perspective as to where we are as a species. And this remote viewer was going in and out of his body. He was essentially going into like an abduction experience. He was in this metallic room, and his guides, quote, quote, guides, were lining up. They were flanking him on the right and left, and they appeared to be his guides. Oh, sure, everything was going according to plan until he realized I've been hoodwinked.
Hmm.
They've hijacked this experience. And when they realized that this was not going to work out, next thing he knows, he's back into his body. Now, I've spoken to his son. I have photographic evidence of this. When his father came downstairs from that session, he was inconsolable, could not speak, and all he could do was cry. He had a massive heart attack. When they got him to the hospital, they began to see burning manifestations on his chest,
Hmm.
and subdermal scarification began to manifest underneath the skin to the surface. And they were amulets,
Hmm.
just like we've seen in the occult. Very scary stuff, stuff that transcends what we think we know about the occult and the darkness. And these amulets were nothing like what we've seen. One of them was an Egyptian hieroglyph that arched its way across this man's chest. And so I talked to a lot of people, and so I know someone who's connected to a lot of practitioners in every known major mystery school. Here you go. What can you see? Nothing. So it seems that whatever they're operating in, it is deeper, darker, and they're playing by different rules than we even know exist.
You mean no one could decipher that particular hieroglyph?
No. And the way they structure them, this is what's most fascinating to me. One of them was the Star of David, if you will. The other one was the cross, and then there was the Egyptian hieroglyph. Now, within demonology, that is controversial because you would never see a Catholic priest employing the Star of David, hold completely different tradition. Vice versa, you certainly wouldn't see a rabbi employing the cross for the same reasons. Now, both of those combined would have never used the Egyptian hieroglyph to war against this darkness. And yet whatever they're doing on that side of the veil, it's exactly that. And it's possible, my friend, that the compartmentalization, not just of the phenomenon, but when this tradition goes to war with that tradition, and all of us are separated, it's possible that that is by design. I'm just throwing this out there. I'm saying because they're using something completely different.
By they
And
you mean the demons.
yes, whatever they are, right. So what scares me even more is that the reason our practitioners, not you and I, obviously, but those that exist in this world, the reason they're using amulets is to pull influence from that dimension to this one.
Mm.
But if they're using amulets that we don't know of or ignorant of against us, it's almost like there's another dimension in that was some form of demonic or alien math. And I know I'm just toying with phrases here. This is why I've been lecturing this whole time about, okay, they're playing by different rules because they're playing a different game.
What game is that, do you think?
Well, I am a proponent, and some of my colleagues are as well, that we're dealing with a singular intelligence.
Mm.
Not that it's God or it's just God or that it's just devil. But in terms of the darkness we're fighting, it does appear, yes, it is a singular intelligence that has been incarnating throughout history. It's an alien, it's a demon, it's the debook, right? It's the ghost. And now what we're seeing is even in UFO abduction cases, my friend, we're seeing hauntings that manifest either before or after,
Mm.
where shadow people are witnessed in conjunction with the beings that are entering the house.
Mm.
So these present significant problems with the current models we're working on. How can they be separate if they're often witnessed together?
Would you say like the amulets could be seen as sigils or logos or like I haven't seen?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And now we're dealing with the iceberg effect. These literally the simplification of language
Mm.
where
That's for sure.
right. And it's disturbing. Father Sinistrari encountered that same pathology where some of the entities operated like serial killers.
Mm.
We couldn't paint them as evil because it was completely immune. Like literally, we were ants to them. And this is what Sinistrari experienced. He had a case study, two of them that are monumental. And if I get to ramble, just tell me to stop.
No.
I'm
This is
just
very interesting.
okay.
Yeah.
So Sinistrari was dealing with incubi encounters, or what he had classified as incubus beings. It's the spirit that appears to a woman in the image of a man. And there was one experiencer that had actually died, and the family had called upon him and their family physician to go and look at the body. And so he's inspecting the body, and he pulls back her eyelids. And the entity that had been accosting and haunting her had carved his sigils, amulets, underneath her eyelids so that whenever she would close her eyes, she was staring into them. So again, this implies that we are being introduced or at least invaded, even as minute as it is, but being invaded by another species of evil that has simplified itself as just horns and hooves. Throw some holy water at me and I'm gone. And yet, if you were to sit down with one of these beings and actually pick their brain, I'm convinced that it would be something completely other,
Mm.
to where, what are you doing with her? Well, I'm branding her. Why? There's only a handful of possibilities. They're not doing it for us because we don't understand that.
So what would you say those handful are?
Right, for other entities, or marking the body so that when it looks at it again, it can pull back and see if that's the same body it marked 100 years ago.
Ah.
This is complicated.
Mm.
And I think that in order for us to even start asking the right questions, we have to allow ourselves to think beyond it, to even to areas of which we would seem to be crazy, like I am right now. But
Right.
but
Right.
we have to ask these questions. But
Well,
that's where I'm at right now. Like I said before, when I was studying demonology, I realized that there was something that wanted so desperately to appear as
let's
demonic.
let's get crazy. What would those questions
Let's
be, do you
go.
think? Let's go. Let's go.
Mm,
Like
mm,
what would these alternative questions be,
right.
you feel like at the forefront
Yeah.
of your vocation?
So if we look at the occult connections, well, first of all, let me back up and say this. There was a time in my career where I believe we were dealing with multiple intelligences. That was until I started to look at the pathologies of the incubi encounters, realizing that this was just another way this phenomenon replicates its species. It was not limited to the insemination of the woman. It was also tied to possessing the fetus within the womb. Uh-oh, you froze, brother.
No, no, I'm just considering that. I think I'm still here, possessing the fetus in the womb. So it hit me for a
Yes.
second. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So this is the idea of the missing fetus syndrome we see now in modernity,
Cool.
in that newest incarnation of ufology. Now, again, like I said before, the 16th century demonology took a kind of a wild right turn, because up to that point, we had separated, the hybrid from the incubus, and we could not put those together. And so what started occurring in Softy Israel was that you had a being that manifested two women in the images of lovers and husbands. Check that's the incubi. And then it would actually possess the woman, to where now she goes to her priest or her rabbi, and they're interrogating the spirit. The spirit's causing all kind of ruckus. And then, okay, they weren't able to exercise it. Come see us again in a week. Well, she comes back in a week, and now she's experiencing pregnancy symptoms,
Hmm.
and her belly and her stomach is beginning to show. And so it wasn't just one female; it was multiple started coming forward with the very same encounters. Now they begin to perform the lavouche method, which is two fingers on the wrist, and they feel two heartbeats, two pulses even in the same body.
Puh.
Now they started asking the most profound question I've heard either in any field of this research, and that was, are these women pregnant by the entities they encountered, or are they pregnant with them?
I don't know with them. Interesting.
Yes, and their hypothesis, I should say, their theory at that point, was that the fetus itself was the host and not the female. And when the phenomenon took the consciousness out of the woman, the fetus was gone as well. And that, I believe, is what we're considering to be the missing fetus syndrome right now in ufology. We
Hmm.
didn't know that because we thought they were completely opposite phenomena.
Hmm. Would something that just hit me, be inclined to let's say, reevaluate what Adam and Eve means in relation to this at the time, the fall? Sounds very similar to me.
Well, immaculate conception, immaculate inception. And
Mm.
it's almost like, and I'm not saying this to be in a literal way, but it's almost like we're in a game and there are beings trying to incarnate in the game.
Mm.
And whereas in times past, and I know this is a fact, that they would lean in and out of archetypes, where if this is what you believe, okay, if we were in Europe, we are the Fae. And so the phenomenon would say, okay, that's cool. I'm going to lean into that.
Mm.
And the reason is, if it can mask itself, mask its true source, mask its true identity, we'll never know how to approach it. We'll never know how to fight it. And more importantly, we'll never understand its origin. And now what, in my opinion, what we're seeing is that the phenomenon is desired to design and create its own character now in the program. It's realized that we've seen through the masks. We can now vet. If it's Dear Aunt Edna, it'll act like Dear Aunt Edna.
Mm.
But if it zigs when Dear Aunt Edna would zag and we see, okay, that was just you leading us along, it realized that. And in a way, this intelligence updated and it created its own character, one in which we cannot vet. And that is the ET.
Ah, that makes sense. I mean, it gives a whole new origin to religion and the dark side of what's gone on in the
Right.
unloving aspects of, all of the religions that are supposed to be loving, but, in practice
Aren't.
are not.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Poisoning the well to where there's blood in the water. And that to a major degree, that's what we've seen. And more importantly, now it's like, okay, yes, we know what we've wanted from them in times past, right? Specifically within, ritual magic, we're going to build altars within the proximity of the phenomenon in Syria and the Middle East, and underneath the cosmology of stars, perform rituals that are not ours, by the way. We didn't give them; it's theirs.
I mean, the
And so we
sacrifice
inherit them.
rituals.
Yes,
Right.
yes, that's most interesting as well.
Mm.
And right. And so what do they favor? And I think that's where I'm at this point. We've had enough of, okay, give us technology. What are they wanting from us? Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to be required.
What do you mean by required?
Well, right now, okay, if we look at the latest evolution of this intelligence, it would be merging ritual magic with scientific discovery.
Yeah.
Right. We're looking at Jack Parsons, Aleister Crowley,
Right.
Albert Bender, George Hunt Williamson, the very first contactees, if you will, who were taking ritual magic, ceremonial magic, and incorporating that in order to, encounter the phenomenon. And in doing so, they were given exactly what our ancestors were: technological advances. What do you mean? Carving names and letters into amulets,
Mm.
pieces of metal, putting them in bodies. That was not inherent to the practitioner. It's alien to the technology of that time. Matter of fact, it's still to this day. And yet the phenomenon knew, in order to, this is deep, but in order to replicate and incarnate, it had to seed us with technology. And that is exactly what our government is suggesting today. That in the New Mexico desert, right? The gifting field. Are you familiar with this?
No, what is the gift?
Okay.
Yeah.
The gifting field is allegedly where Tim Taylor, who's one of our leading scientists, is going out to a New Mexico desert, building altars underneath the cosmology of stars, going through ceremonial magic and just even rituals, if you will, in order to be given a gift of technology. Guess what? It's gonna blow your mind. A small piece of metal. Where does that put us at?
How small?
Depends. Sometimes small, sometimes small. I mean, I've seen pieces of metal that they published about that big and had different carvings and stuff into it. But what blows my mind is we have convinced ourselves that this is a modern intelligence.
Mm.
And at least the evidence I've collected through the years, it suggests that if our model of the phenomenon is wrong, which, meaning it's strictly spiritual or it's strictly material, it's both. But if our model of the phenomenon is wrong, then our timeline for disclosure might also be wrong, which could mean that disclosure could have happened the emergence of the first altars.
I mean, it could have something to do with the enforced zingers. They've encouraged everyone to
Well,
get into their bodies over the last 4 years.
there we go.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree, my friend. But again, we're just now wanting to ask these questions because for the last 50 years, the paranormal field has compartmentalized it and have separated this. And the reason I believe they've done that is because the phenomenon wants us to.
Right.
It's not just covering its bases, it's covering its faces.
Mm. I mean, I've heard that even TV was supposedly originally invented to chat with the other side, so to speak.
Mm,
So,
I've heard that as well.
yeah.
It's fascinating because it's almost like we're entering a new era of research. Like I said, it's not an accident that during some abductions there are preceded by hauntings, shadow figures. And if this is a singular intelligence, and if we start realizing this is okay, they're all the same, then now it's almost like we're making eye contact with something that's been trying to hide. Now we have the bloody footprints in the snow. Now we know there are behavioral patterns that no matter what incarnation it's in, it does the same. It wants the same. That's going to be a powerful movement here in the future.
And what do we do with this movement, do you think?
Well, it's going to destroy models, but it goes deeper than that. Within a lot of people, the phenomenon has created a symbiotic relationship.
Cool.
And what that means is during each and every incarnation, that incarnation comes with worldviews
I would agree. Yeah, yeah.
that have connections ontologically to the afterlife, to what we're doing here, what I believe is, and all of that. I was in the United Kingdom lecturing, and I was just talking to people. There was one individual that walked up to me, and he's talking to other people that were presenting alongside of me. And we get to talking, and my friend Paul St. Clair is looking at him. He goes, "Okay, this could be interesting." So the guy's thinking, that I'm a ufologist or something. He's not really familiar with me and my research. So he starts asking me questions, the usual questions. And I said, "Well, why are we seeing aliens during seances? What's going on there?" In just that one question, you could see just the question itself wasn't just changing his understanding of the phenomenon; it was starting to change his worldview. And I think that even within ufology, your materialists who are so scientifically minded, it creates a symbiotic relationship to where if that model itself is wrong, then now they have to question their own worldview. And that is difficult.
Almost impossible for some, but essential for everyone, I would say. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it's important. And but there are gatekeepers right now in the field that do not want us to see it as a singular intelligence. They want incubi to be different than the abduction encounters. They want the hybrids we know of in antiquity to be different than what we know right now. And that's just not the case. But it's getting interesting out there.
Would you say these gatekeepers are infected, so to speak, or just stupid?
Very good point. Well, I think it's a combination. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm gonna get canceled real quick. No, I think that there are people that are in the know, and I know for a fact that there have been entire conglomerates, think tanks, that have purchased the voices of many researchers who, like it. Let's say if they're doing good research, all their research goes right back to the think tank. And despite what their conclusions are, right, when they're talking to the think tank, well, I think this is all malevolent. Despite all of that, the think tank says, "Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get all of your information and all your data. Thank you so much. We're going to give you your stipend for the month,
Mm.
but this is what I want you to go and tell the population." So there are people out there, even in conferences, who are going around saying something completely different than what they're telling people behind closed doors. So it's hard to say that, are they doing this organically or have they been purchased?
Yeah, maybe the voices have purchased them. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that's at work too.
So the think tanks, let's talk about them for a moment.
Mhm.
What would you say their origins are? You're always wanting to get to the bottom of or I
Yeah,
have anyways, who's in charge, why it's there, who put them there.
right.
What is even a think tank?
Well, what we're dealing with are factions within our own government, people that you cannot look up on the internet, people that have no names, that have literally signed off their entire lives for this. And so I would say that some of these individuals and think tanks began in the 1950s when Jack Parsons died.
Mm.
And this is one of them is called the Collins Elite. I love this kind of research right here. If you've never heard of them, because I didn't either at one point, But when Jack Parsons died, there was a portal opened up, and this is what they believed. And through that portal came beings that were first conjured during ritual magic. This is where we get Aiwas. This is where we get Lamb. And then when Parsons died, he also believed he had opened up a portal in which these entities could come through. So at the emergence of that technology, if you will, because what Parsons was doing was he was accessing intelligences and then incorporating the knowledge he was getting from them into his rocket program.
Not
And so
surprised.
when he died, our government said there's something wrong with our model. What is he doing incorporating that kind of information into science?
Right.
It's weird. And so they created what's called the Collins Elite in around 1952. And these were a conglomerate of physicists from the Department of Defense. But they were studying the various intersectionalities between the occult and technology. And that is one of the think tanks that are still existing today underneath a different banner.
I mean, maybe science is just another name for demons, would be my guess at this point
Oh,
in our society.
does it though? Doesn't it lead us to a whole new can of worms
Yeah.
where we can no longer have the same conversations we had prior?
No.
They no longer fit. And that's where we're at. We've got to think larger, deeper, and perhaps darker sometimes, unfortunately.
Well, no, I'm ready. So let's go a little darker. So science and tech. What's
Yeah.
behind it, do you think? Like CERN, let's say. Well, you've seen, I guess, the opening ceremonies of CERN. Probably you've watched
Right.
a bit of that. It seems like they're conjuring or trying to conjure a certain sort of energy more
Oh,
than what they're saying.
yes, I believe that 100%. And obviously on UFO Twitter, people will poo-poo that idea, but that's okay. That's fine. Uh, but here's the point. They're not alone in this. They're not alone in this at all. And again, where is this rooted? This is rooted in the primordial man. That's when now this is incredible too. Now, the current theory is that they seeded us with technology, but technology was the secondary consequence to ritual magic,
Mm.
at least in this framework. So is it possible they did not seed us with technology? They seeded us with ritual magic first, and technology was merely something we used to get access to that. These are just the thoughts that keep me up at
No,
night.
like TV being
Right.
invented, and the desire to reach out to something was probably first, like you said, or you could equate that to it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And then a thought comes in the head. Wait a minute. What's going on? I want you to go out there underneath the stars. Hmm? We've seen that before, right? And it's fascinating to me because it's like, okay, when does the experience actually begin?
Good
It
question.
can't begin, right? It cannot possibly be when the altar is, created at an undisclosed location, right? Not at all.
Right. Like what brought them together? What made them want to do that? What even invoked the desires of,
Right.
was it personal gain, do you
Oh,
think?
yes, that and now within our own government, it is the scientific prowess and military superiority. But if we're getting back to the idea of, asking new questions, we're on a new horizon here. We see it, we feel it, we just don't understand it. And back to the idea of where does it begin? In my belief, and this is what I'm coming to, it's disturbing, but it begins with a thought.
I would agree.
And then with the thought comes obedience. And the individual doesn't realize, right? Who decides to go to that location? Who picked it out?
Mm.
And in my lecture in the UK, the idea was who's conjuring who? Because by the time the practitioner, let's pick Tim Taylor out, By the time Tim Taylor says, you know what, I'm going to go to an undisclosed location somewhere in the New Mexico desert. I'm going to pick up about 50 rocks. I'm going to put them all together. And then about maybe 7:30 at night when the sun starts to set, then I'm going to, wait a minute. By that time, you're not the conjurer. At that point, you are the one obeying it. And what it appears to be is that the phenomenon is dropping ladders made of letters. And at the moment of posturing, the moment of obeying,
Letters.
and by the, yes,
Letters.
Incantations, yes.
Right, alphabet, gotcha. Okay.
And again, leading us into a world that is not our own, to which when that proto-intelligence, the one that actually exists behind all of the mask, when that phenomenon manifests, we're at a loss. Because we know what rules aliens allegedly follow. What's this?
And what would you say? What is this?
Well, it plays by its own rules. I think it's a form of cryptid consciousness. And whatever this is, it responds more to ritual and belief, faith.
Belief is a good one. The lie in belief, the evil of belief. I don't know if you've heard or you've seen that video. It's a fascinating video. A fellow named Scooter Rockets basically says that's where all evil comes from, is belief.
It's terrifying because it's putting us, like I said, it's making it, forcing us into a conversation that I don't believe a lot of us want to have. Because if we look at the, like, let's do the law of percentages here. If the phenomenon is both scientific and ritual, or at least ritual magic, well, how much of that is the case? Is it 60-40? Right? And is it possible that technology is just them giving us what we want? And then at the end of the day, what are we giving them? Worship, belief, faith, build an altar. And unfortunately,
Attention,
again,
attention.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, with today's researchers that are locked in this current, scientific model, if they don't go back to Mesopotamia, they don't go, if they're thinking, okay, I'm going to study the tree from its branches and not from its roots, then they'll never go back to the original historical context, right? To say, okay, where were these altars first built? Well, okay, and then start looking at behavioral patterns, right? Where they were built in the Levant. Where? Well, our ancestors believed that there were portals connected to where the phenomenon would respond to them in a quicker way. Well, yeah, that's what we're dealing with. And it's uncomfortable.
I mean, I've seen and I fully believe, the pushing of the AI, which to me, and it's not my original idea, it's just the all-seeing eye, is maybe that's where these demons are hiding behind, the technology, the cell phones, obviously, all of these bits and pieces of tech, getting smaller and smaller and smaller, as you say, to the point where they're even putting them inside bodies at times, where I've seen pictures anyways, I can't say for sure, but it seems to me it's a way of these beings gaining the control that they've been after for a long time.
Absolutely. It's, the replication of their species. In a lot of this, at least specifically within demonology, I believe that's what it's about. Like the branch of demonology as a discipline, it's centered around their replication, possession, pregnancy, all of that. I mean, I even discovered a ceremony, just one ceremony performed by a sorcerer. And it has different variations, but every nuance of it checks all the boxes of everything we know in demonology, everything. Where if the sorcerer, the practitioner, is dying, he's inept, he will go and find a woman and inseminate her with the fetus, incubus. He puts her through a dream state, sometimes feeds her drugs to do so. Then he impregnates her. That's pregnancy. That's the hybrid. Then that's the debug phenomenon, even in the 16th century. And then he tells the baby, the fetus, this is mine. Your body is mine. He commandeers the consciousness of that biological avatar. That's his now. And then he takes it. All of this could be seen as the missing fetus syndrome, but we weren't looking in that direction. We were looking at ET, not realizing there's an interconnectivity here with the occult that cannot be ignored.
Well, as a demonologist, let's say, what is your job?
Mhm. Well, my job is to look into the darkness and research it, study it, not to emulate it, not to worship it, not to exercise it. That's an exercise. But to gather information and insights so that whenever we do approach this, we have a little bit of a backstory, a little bit of a better grasp on it to hopefully place us in a less dangerous position. Now, at this point, I'm looking for new vocabulary,
Hmm.
right? Because there's something deeper at play. And it is so deep that I and others we often speak in paradoxes because the phenomenon is tying us into balls. But that's what I'm doing. Like even like I think you are my second to the last interview for the next couple of months because I've done hundreds, but now I'm to the point where I want to be silent, right? And
Hmm.
I want to compile the research I've done and start to write out new vocabulary.
Interesting to find new ways to be, new ways to relate, let's say, with what's going on. I would agree with you. I struggle daily to come up with new vocabulary or new ideas for what it is that I'm experiencing and why,
Right.
and to expand my
Correct.
consciousness, beyond what I've been told is possible.
Right. And it will come at a price.
What do you mean?
It's interesting. Well, I've been threatened by the phenomenon before,
Mm,
and I just had an experience the other day that was working with Dr. Carla Turner before she died. He's very into my research and he's a supporter, love to death. But he had a dream, and in the dream, one of the beings came to him and said, "Stop talking to Nathaniel Gillis.
mm.
Stop looking at his research." And this is what's most interesting to me. Don't even speak his name. So I don't know how to feel about that, but I'm making a difference, hopefully. But when I come back again, start doing interviews, I'm hopefully going to have a working vocabulary to where other researchers who have also struggled will have something to point at and say, okay, I didn't realize what I was studying, but that's what it sounds like.
Well, we could get in, I guess, to the whole Etiko thing and the harvesting
Mhm.
of human energy as to their
Mhm.
raison d'être. I don't speak French very well, but the reason for existing. Why this is all. I mean, it could be very simple as far as the demonology and the demonists, and that at
Right.
least some people have you know uh used that as a theory. What do you think about it?
Right. Well, I mean, the entity I encountered in my youth, they call it loosh. That's the pop culture thing. That's the little word for it. But it was deeper and darker than that. I mean, it would induce me into looping nightmares
Mm.
where I could not get out of it. Like I'm there to witness, I'm there to watch. And it would go over and over again. And it was a repetitive nightmare that consisted of one individual putting a needle in his arm. And again, I was 8 years old, so I had no context to drug addiction, insulin, nothing. And that was one individual on the right. The one on the left would put a gun in his mouth, pull a trigger. And then you'd think I'd wake up, but then it would start back again. And so when it would let me out of that nightmare, that's when I could feel it in the room. The only way I can explain it was that it would project terror on me and then it would feed off of me.
I had similar dreams when I was 8, or just out of kindergarten, being taken into a
Yeah.
wall when I was sleeping by a monstrous being, and wake up terrified in my bed, and have falling through the bottom and things like that. It's interesting that it happened to me too at a very young age.
Yeah.
Um, I guess you could say the attempted possession at the time, you just thought, oh, I just had a bad dream, or there's a monster under the bed.
Correct.
Seems like a lot of
Right.
children have this experience. A lot of the
Yeah.
mythology and fairy tales seem to allude to that.
Correct. And I'm friends with a lot of researchers right now that was their origin story, and sadly enough, we don't really know why that's the case. Obviously, I think I was being targeted, and maybe you as well, where if for some reason to feed off of the innocence, maybe it's a flavor or something. Because I know for me, uh, I could hear it walking in the living room.
Mm,
I could hear conversations going on above my head.
mm,
So, and what's so fascinating to me, at least, is later on, like now I'm 35, I know researchers that have been doing this longer than I've been alive, and they're like, "Yo, yeah, that's called direct voice phenomenon." I'm like, "Do what?" Yeah, that's when they're talking to you, not through an EVP. They're talking directly to you. I had no idea. That was
mm.
occurring to me at 8 years old. So some of this has to be initiation, or at least testing our senses into that world. And that could be for a good or bad reason.
Mm. Maybe hardening you for your future vocation.
True, true. And that's the way I look at it. That's the way I have to look at it.
Well, maybe we can talk about some of the tech you mentioned earlier
Yeah.
and what
In terms
that,
of what they've inspired or
yeah, like what that looks
okay.
like, what that could be, if how you want to tie it into maybe the
Mm.
modern age and CERN
Yeah.
and cell phones and the
Mhm.
5G and all of these things, the new diseases supposedly coming, all those sorts of things, which to me, I think it's all tied back into this personally, but that's just my opinion.
Oh, it's a huge possibility, a huge probability, because it's not just that our government was talking to these beings and giving impartations of technology, but they were trying to disseminate that
Mm,
into our military industrial complex. Now, how much of that has entered into the public sphere? My friend, now we're getting deep, right? How
yes.
much of that tech is present in our world? We are ignorant of that. And if we're going with that hypothesis of them seeding us with technology, okay, now it makes more sense. Now the danger is twofold. Number one, I've had cases. I had one case study where I was working with a family. It was an incubus case, but the entity was challenging the husband, and the husband, yeah, like, well, what happened was the husband challenged him, and the
Right.
husband went to bed one night, and he woke up with Bell's palsy. His right face was, yeah, suffering um,
Oh,
temporary
really?
paralysis. Yeah,
Mm,
he challenged it, and his testimony was that he went to bed at night, challenged it, didn't know what to do with it, and it felt like someone balled up its fist and punched him, was punching him in the night in the face. So, but later on, he went to the hospital. They said, okay, you have head trauma, you get a car accident or a fist fight. He just went, must have been an injury or something. I don't know. He didn't want to tell them what happened. But so, anyways, the reason I brought that up is because one night he was cooking dinner for his family, and he said that he was like getting dishes ready, and to his left, he said he had a cell phone on the nightstand, or like a table, a lamp table or whatever, a table with a lamp on it. And he said of course, his eye, he said, I see my phone light up, and it's an unknown number. He said, then I see my phone swipe. He's like, what? So yeah, that's how you answer, right? But boom, answer the phone. And then when you push on the speaker button, it blows up. He said, then I saw the speaker button blow up. And then an entity began to converse with me, called him by name and said, come over and talk to me. So this
I'm not
is the problem where,
I'm not
I'm
surprised.
sorry.
I'm not surprised.
Right, right. This is the problem with Elon Musk. Again, they're grooming the human condition. Elon Musk just recently came forward and said that one of the goals and fears, if you will, of Neuralink is that it creates a symbiotic relationship with the person it's implanted into. So, whatever we're dealing with, if they are seeding us with technology, we have a serious problem.
I think they only admit to what's already happening, in my opinion. It's like the chemtrails.
Right,
Well, they're admitting to it now that it's for supposedly helping, the climate BS on the planet. But, I've been seeing them for 30, 40 years already. So when they start admitting to it like a symbiotic relationship, what do they even mean
right.
by that? How would you define a symbiotic relationship? Yeah,
Well, yeah, that's just one-sided right now because we know what we're getting from it. What is it getting from us?
Well,
That's unique.
what are people getting? I mean, they think they're getting ease of life, let's say, higher technology, advanced. I don't know what it is. What do people think they're getting from this? What would you say from this
Like
so-called
this,
symbiotic
this
relationship?
is now we're entering into their world and into their minds.
Right.
Worship, worship. Our ancestors believed and they were told. This is in a paper about the Rephaim in biblical antiquity, that they were told, if you do not give us sacrifices, if you do not give us worship, we will turn into evil ghosts and haunt your houses. Take that model, put that onto hauntology right now.
Hmm.
Is it possible? See, again, history has a story to tell. And we know this phenomenon is interwoven into the fabric of history. So ignoring it, we can ignore it to our own demise.
Mm.
But there was a case study that was it was called the Moffat case study, where Deborah Moffat came forward. There was an no, it was a Centurion ritual
Hmm.
that was botched, and out of it came an entity that was wanting a human sacrifice. And you know what he did? He haunted the house. Exactly what our ancestors believed. And so it's possible haunting phenomena is the beck and call to worship, the beck and call to build something. Give me, matter of fact, this particular case study had Dr. Evelyn Puglini show up at the house. And she was one of Art Bell's favorite, guests to have on, coast to coast. But anyways, Evelyn Puglini goes in and they had already exhausted Ed Lorraine Warren, the local priest, the exorcist. They had the sidekick to Lloyd Auerbach went in, did an investigation. None of them could even come close to touching this entity. And when Evelyn Puglini went in, she went around the house and it hated her. Her advice, which blew my mind, was build it an altar, give it a room, and it will turn positive. So I'm reconsidering some of the earlier positions I've had on what they are.
Turning positive. What
Right.
does she mean? What do you mean? Like,
Well,
how do you turn a demon positive?
well, again, this is fascinating. So this particular entity was writing on the bathroom mirror with soap. He said that he was sort of like a priest at one time
The
or a
entity.
druid. Yes. This is again,
So
this is crazy.
disembodied voice was this is through the interactions, the seance, the
Yes.
intervention.
The
Okay, so
yeah, it was a ritual of Santeria, and a
okay,
ball of light manifested and kind of flew through the
gotcha.
house. Next thing they know, this entity is demanding a ritual blood sacrifice, and even apported a spear into the bed at nighttime. The husband woke up and felt this cold thing on his leg. What the heck is that? So he gets up, looks at it, it's a spear. So they
Okay.
took it to the Natural History Museum, had
Hmm.
it tested, and that was a spear designed for blood sacrifice, not for
So
war,
so they wanted
not for hunting.
human or any
Yes,
animal?
human,
Is that what they were asking
human,
for in this particular? So
absolutely.
uh, where's the positive? Where's the
There's
turning
no
positive?
positive there.
I
So the
know.
idea, though, right? Yeah. Well, I don't buy into that. Just give what they want. No, they're going to want something again. But that was Evelyn Puglini's theory, was that give it a safe space or a sacred space, build an altar,
Right.
commune with it. But at that point, that becomes a deity, and now it has a role. But I don't believe, again, there was never she never actually did that, right? To where we had enough evidence from the case study to say, okay, this is how it responded. At the very end of it, it was the mother-in-law, it was actually her mother-in-law that was promised to her through a ritual. Isn't that convenient?
What
I'm
does
kidding.
that mean, her mother-in-law? Yeah, but what do you mean her mother? So hold on. So she went in, she was
Yeah.
talking, she said, let's turn this positive, and then the entity turned out to be, or so it claimed to be her mother-in-law.
No, so what happened was the entity wrote on the mirror, I want a blood sacrifice.
Right.
And then it named the person, and that
Oh, I
happened
see.
to be her mother-in-law.
Oh, she wanted her mother-in-law sacrificed.
Yeah, the entity did. Yeah,
Like I said, very convenient from a lot of marriages I've
that's
worked
what I said, right? Yeah, very
in.
convenient. What? Wait a minute. No, that's murder. But yeah, but it's so fascinating because he had said that he used to walk the halls of a cathedral
The entity.
and yeah, and was actually a being, like alive, a person.
Hmm.
And that like hundreds and hundreds of years ago, that they were performing magic and sorcery in like maybe the Vatican or something, I don't know, but somewhere within a cathedral, and that down through the generations,
Hmm.
her mother-in-law was promised. But the again, my emphasis here is on how she believed if you give it what it wants.
Okay, so we were discussing after the demons have technology seemed to jump in and separate us for a second, the positive aspects of what was being suggested to
Mhm.
build that altar. So what do you think was going on in this specific altercation?
Specific. I don't know. You know, what disturbs me the most about this case study is the way he was using terror to recruit.
Hmm.
And it's quite possible that I don't know if we caught this on the last one, but it's quite possible that if they're using hauntings
Hmm.
as a way to manipulate us into worship, as they've done in history and as they did in this case study, then it's possible that we need to reconsider hauntology as an entire field of study.
Hmm.
But in terms of the positive, I really don't know, my friend. I don't know. Unfortunately, I believe there was a man that came into that house to interact with that entity, and he took it home with him. So there was never any um, evidence, or at least any case study left, to where we could say that's what occurred. But let's say that they did build an altar for it.
Right.
Who knows? Who knows? I mean, I know that its abilities, if we're to take that, and believe it, um, apports were common. They would go out to eat with apports, where it would just manifest something.
What's the
And
ports?
then, so that is when the phenomenon will just create a construct or
Okay.
literally just manifest something that doesn't belong
Right.
where you're at. And so they would go out to eat with a friend down the street.
Hmm.
And the friend would say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and pay, thinking he's, a big shot. He looks for his wallet and it's gone. They would go back home and they would open up the mailbox and there's the wallet.
Hmm.
So it
Right.
played games with them. But so I don't really know. Unfortunately, we don't know what the good side would have been if there would have been a good side. Who knows? They could have just, again, keep manipulating them, working them in different situations. But it does imply that our ancestors were partially correct in that some of these beings will demand worship and demand something from us. And then as a way of punishing us, here you go. I'm going to manifest a ghost, or I'm going to haunt you into obedience. And that's not cool. And again, like I said before, that causes me concern, because how many case studies have we heard in ontology where, like again, my experience, apparitions,
Hmm.
beings speaking in the middle of the night, all of this could have stemmed from an entity hoping that we knew what it wanted.
Which is worship, is what you mean by wanting.
Worship.
Worship.
Oh, worship. Yeah. Give me a sacred space. And again, I'm just theorizing here, but there's a lot, I believe, that, at least from my perspective, that we have to reconsider, because we've taken everything for granted, saying, okay, well, yeah, we know what that is. And this new research that's coming forward, I don't think we have a clue. And it's possible that the phenomenon led us into these pig trails, these gloomy labyrinths of deception,
Hmm.
for a reason.
Maybe just to distract us while it keeps feasting.
Right?
I
Yeah.
mean,
Look
because
up there, not down here. Right? Look up there, not in here.
right, I would say that would be the case. I mean, you talked originally when we first started chatting about a singular consciousness, right, instead of a
Hmm.
multiple one. Would you
Yeah.
take the tack, let's say, of saying that could be part of the hive mind of with multiple
Right.
Like an ant colony, let's say, or a bee colony, something of that nature.
Yes. Yeah, I'm leaning more towards that every day because even with the hybrids, you could have 1,000 different avatars, but one consciousness. And we've heard of that in some of the ufological case studies, for instance, like
Hmm.
the Rendlesham Forest case study, where the military personnel are out there and they see this thing land, and there were beings that were outside on the ground, walking, looking around. And one witness said that all of them, when they were ready to leave, all of them in unison zoom, looked up,
I mean, I would
one
go so far.
consciousness.
I would go so far as to say, living in Japan, it seems to me 89 to 95% of the women here now all look the same. I'll have the same look in their eye. I'll carry the same cell phone. I'll have the same
Copies.
hairstyle. I'll wear the same makeup. I'll look, for lack of a better way to put it, very unloving when you look in their eyes these days.
Mhm.
Like I find the opposite. It's a shock for me to see a loving look in a person's eye when I'm walking around. The opposite is almost always the case. To me, they seem haunted
Mhm.
or infected or invaded.
Well, in the Apocrypha of John, it was a Gnostic text. It was a commentary on the early portions of the hybridization program. It had all these different nuances to it. They manifested to women in the images of their lovers, their husbands, the whole incubus
Mm,
Nephilim thing.
mm,
But it said that they made copies of bodies.
mm.
So you can have, again, 100 different bodies, and you kill one, that doesn't matter, that consciousness, the host consciousness, gone. But this is so outlandish and out there. But I believe absolutely we have to think outside of the box, because this phenomenon has been burying us in intellectual coffins. And I believe it's time for a revival.
Emotional coffins, intellectual coffins, life
Yeah, yeah,
coffins,
yeah.
all of these things. All right. Well,
Unfortunately.
Nathaniel, I mean, is there any way you'd like to leave our viewers? Like how can they reach out to you? How can they support
Yeah.
you? What are you doing now? What will you be doing over the next couple of months before you're back in the
So,
public eye?
yeah, I have one more interview and then I'm taking probably 2 months off. I'm going to be revamping my website and tying some loose ends together. And then, like I said, formulating more of my newest research. The way I can get it out to the masses. It's unique, but again, we have to think outside of the box. So hopefully it'll be received well. You can reach me at this point because my website's not up. You can reach me on my Instagram channel, my page. I have Nathaniel J. Gillis. You can follow my work on my YouTube channel under the same name. There is a playlist I have with all of my interviews on YouTube. It's I think approaching 122. So that's the way you guys can, not just you guys, but everybody can kind of look more into my work. But it's a pleasure meeting you, my friend. I really had a good time. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, yeah, it was fun. I would love to have you back in a few months. Feel free
Yes,
to
sir.
reach out when you're ready. We can talk about your new research, dive a little deeper, see if we can get a
Yeah,
stranglehold
for
on those
sure.
demons and maybe talk
Yeah,
about some solutions and things like that for our viewers.
I would love to. Thank you, my friend.
Okay, thanks for being on. Everyone, thank you so much. I'll leave Nathaniel's links below. If anyone has any questions or suggestions, I'll pass them along. And perhaps over the next few months, we can get back to you with some new answers. Thank you very much, Nathaniel.
Thank you.
Can't make me lie, lie to my heart. No one tells me where I should start. Freedom first is what I say.